What if the deadliest mistake modern homes make in winter is the very same mistake ancient people learned to avoid more than 1,000 years ago? When people imagine winter, they picture blizzards, icy winds, frozen breath hanging in the air. We are trained to fear the sky. The Vikings did not. They understood something most modern societies still overlook. Cold kills quietly, and it kills from the ground up. Heat does not vanish dramatically. It is drained steadily, invisibly through contact. Every time a human body touches frozen earth, stone, or moisture-laden soil, energy flows outward, not because of wind, not because of storms, but because physics demands balance. Most civilizations responded by burning more fuel, larger hearths, bigger fires, endless woodcutting. The Vikings chose a different path. Instead of feeding the fire, they redesigned the ground. They realized survival did not depend on how fiercely a flame burned, but on how slowly warmth was allowed to escape. That realization would shape one of the most quietly sophisticated thermal systems of the ancient world, hidden not in walls or roofs, but beneath the floor itself. Walk into a modern home in a cold climate. The roof is insulated, the walls are sealed, the windows are triple glazed, and beneath your feet, concrete, tile, stone, materials that act as perfect cold sinks. Modern building culture obsesses over what we can see, walls, ceilings, windows. But in cold environments, the majority of heat loss occurs vertically downward. The ground absorbs warmth relentlessly, especially when moisture is present. Concrete slabs amplify the problem. Concrete conducts heat faster than wood or earth. It cannot breathe. Moisture becomes trapped. Cold condensation forms. The floor feels cold, even when the thermostat claims comfort. The result is a paradox modern people accept as normal. The house is warm, but the floor is always cold. For the Vikings, this condition was not uncomfortable. It was lethal. Children sleeping near frozen ground grew sick. Adults weakened over long winters. Settlements failed not because of enemies or famine, but because warmth was being stolen silently, night after night. So the Vikings did what engineers always do when survival is at stake. They went to the source of the problem. They looked down. The Vikings are often remembered as raiders, explorers, warriors. But this is only the surface of the story. In daily life, they were environmental engineers shaped by necessity. Northern Europe offered no mercy. Long winters, limited fuel, frozen soil, constant moisture. Mistakes were punished immediately, and survival favored those who observed nature rather than fought it. The Vikings noticed patterns others ignored. They watched frost creep upward from soil. They felt dampness drain warmth faster than wind. They observed how stone stored heat long after fire faded. Most importantly, they understood that Earth itself breathes freezing, thawing, expanding, contracting. A house that resisted this movement would fail. A house that worked with it could endure. From this mindset emerged a principle still central to sustainable design today. The most reliable heat is not produced quickly, it is stored slowly. And the best place to store it was beneath their feet. A Viking longhouse was never built directly on frozen ground. Instead, the floor was raised typically 10 to 40 centimeters, just enough to sever direct contact with soil and moisture. This was not elevation for visibility or defense. It was thermal strategy. By lifting the floor, the Vikings broke what modern physics calls the conductive bridge, the direct pathway through which cold and moisture drain heat. Even a small air gap radically changes thermal behavior. Moisture could no longer rise through capillary action. Cold soil could no longer siphon body heat directly. A stable buffer zone formed beneath the living space. Interestingly, this solution appears independently in other cultures. Traditional Japanese homes, for example, also raised floors to manage moisture and temperature. Different climates, same physics. Same conclusion. If you want warmth to last, the ground must never touch you directly. For the Vikings, this elevation was only the beginning. Beneath the raised floor lay a carefully layered mineral foundation. First came gravel, loose, porous, and naturally draining. Gravel ensured that groundwater moved downward, not upward. It prevented soil from freezing into a solid thermal block beneath the house. Above the gravel rested sand, creating a stable, even surface that distributed heat without trapping moisture. And then came the most powerful component of all: stone. Not just any stone. Vikings selected dense rocks such as granite and gabbro materials with high thermal mass. These stones absorbed heat slowly, while the hearth burned and released it just as slowly after the fire died. The floor became a primitive thermal battery. Archaeology confirms this was intentional. Excavations in northern Europe have revealed stones bearing clear signs of repeated heating and cooling, thin ash layers beneath subfloor stones, reddened mineral surfaces stained by long-term heat exposure. These were not decorative choices. They were deliberate engineering decisions. The Vikings did not need formulas. They had centuries of lived experimentation, and the evidence is still buried beneath their homes. Above the stone layer came materials chosen not for permanence, but for performance. Straw, reeds, rushes, raw wool. Each offered something modern insulation often lacks: breathability. Straw trapped air inside hollow stems, slowing heat transfer. Reeds resisted moisture with waxy surfaces. Wool insulated even when damp and resisted decay. Together, these materials created a living insulation layer that regulated both temperature and humidity. What makes the Viking system extraordinary is its seasonal adaptability. In winter, families thickened the organic layer, doubling straw, adding wool, increasing insulation. In summer, portions were removed, allowing ventilation and preventing trapped humidity. This was modular, insulation adjusted by hand, guided by experience. Modern homes rarely change with seasons. Viking homes did, because survival demanded it. Every layer breathed. Nothing was sealed. Moisture moved freely and never stagnated long enough to rot the structure from within. The final surface was wood, but not the thick, rigid flooring we expect today. Viking floor planks were thin and flexible, often made from slow-grown spruce or pine. Dense fibers formed in harsh climates made the wood naturally insulating, yet responsive to environmental changes. The thinness mattered. Thick, rigid floors trap moisture and crack under seasonal stress. Thin planks allowed expansion, contraction, and ventilation. Moist air could rise and escape instead of condensing below. The floor was not a sealed object. It was a living interface between humans and environment. When combined with turf roofs, sometimes over 1/2 meter thick, and dense timber walls, the longhouse became a closed thermal ecosystem. Heat stored in stone rose gently. Turf trapped it. Walls stabilized it. Even after the fire died, warmth lingered near the floor, exactly where people slept. This was not coincidence. It was passive heating, perfected without electricity, pumps, or modern technology. Archaeology leaves little doubt. Viking floors were standardized, rebuilt seasonally, and maintained for generations. In Iceland, turf houses using the same principles remained occupied into the 20th century. They survived because they worked. Modern architecture often fails where Viking design succeeded. Concrete slabs drain heat, vapor barriers trap moisture, insulation focuses upward while ignoring vertical heat loss. The Viking floor endures because of its simplicity. It breathes, it adapts, it stores heat without forcing it, and it reminds us of something deeply uncomfortable. Ancient people were not primitive. They were precise. They saw danger where we see convenience. They solved problems we still struggle with, and they did it quietly beneath their feet. If people living 1,000 years ago could out-engineer modern homes using nothing but earth, stone, and observation, what else have we forgotten? What other knowledge lies buried beneath assumptions we no longer question? Here, In the shadows of prehistory, we are reminded that progress is not always forward, and that sometimes the future begins by looking down. This is Prehistoric Shadows.